The fork slipped from my hand and clattered against my mom's good china as her words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. "You're not half the woman your sister is," she said, cutting into her pot roast like she hadn't just demolished 28 years of my self-worth. I felt my face flush hot as I pushed my chair back from the familiar oak dining table where I'd eaten thousands of Sunday dinners. "Then she can start paying your rent," I shot back, watching my dad's fork freeze halfway to his mouth. His face drained of all color as he stammered, "Rent what rent?" That's when I realized my comfortable suburban family had been hiding secrets that would shatter everything I thought I knew. The silence that followed my outburst felt thick enough to cut with a knife. Mom's eyes darted between Dad and me like a tennis ball at Wimbledon. Dad set down his fork with shaking hands and cleared his throat 3 times before any words came out. "Jimmy, I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice cracked on my name like he was going through puberty all over again. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to my banking app, turning the screen toward both of them. "This automatic transfer I set up 8 months ago, $500 every month to your account, Dad. You said it was for that family vacation fund we discussed last Christmas." Mom's hand flew to cover her mouth, and I watched the color drain from her cheeks. Dad stared at the phone screen like it was written in ancient hieroglyphics. "That money," I continued, feeling my anger building like steam in a pressure cooker, "has been going somewhere, and it sure wasn't any vacation fund, was it?" Dad's shoulders sagged like someone had let all the air out of him. He looked older than his 56 years as he rubbed his forehead with both hands. "Son, we didn't know how to tell you. The shop hasn't been doing well since that new chain garage opened on 5th Street. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage." The words hit me like individual punches. 3 months behind. On their mortgage, the house I'd grown up in where Mom had hung my finger paintings on the refrigerator and Dad had taught me to throw a curveball in the backyard. "How behind?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Mom finally found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. $4,200, plus late fees." I felt like someone had sucker punched me. "What about your savings? The money you've been putting away for retirement?" Mom and Dad exchanged a look that spoke volumes without saying a word. It was the same look they'd shared when I was 12 and asked where Grandpa Joe had gone after the funeral. "Sarah's wedding," Mom said finally. The venue she wanted cost $18,000. The dress was another $3,000. The photographer, the flowers, the catering for 200 people. She paused, wrapping her arms around herself like she was cold. "We couldn't say no. She's our little princess, and it was her special day." My brain felt like it was trying to process information in a foreign language. Sarah's wedding had been 6 months ago. A lavish affair at the country club with more flowers than a funeral home and enough food to feed half of Colorado. I'd assumed my parents had saved up for years to give their daughter the fairy tale wedding she'd dreamed about since she was 5. "She doesn't know, does she?" I asked, already knowing the answer from their guilty expressions. Dad shook his head like a dog shaking off water. "We didn't want to burden her with our problems. She's so happy with Brad and they're just starting their life together. We figured we could handle it ourselves." "Handle it? How?" The question came out sharper than I intended. "Dad, your auto repair shop is competing with places that have $1-million advertising budgets and computerized diagnostic equipment. Mom, you work 20 hours a week at the library making $12 an hour. How exactly were you planning to handle almost $5,000 in back mortgage payments?" The truth hung in the air between us like smoke from a grease fire. They hadn't been handling it. They'd been drowning slowly, too proud to ask for help and too ashamed to admit they were in over their heads. "We thought maybe we could take out a loan," Dad said weakly. "Use the house as collateral." "With what income?" I pressed. "Banks don't give loans to people who are already behind on their mortgage payments." Before either of them could answer, my phone rang with Sarah's ringtone. The irony wasn't lost on me as "Material Girl" by Madonna filled the awkward silence. Mom's face lit up like someone had plugged her into an electrical socket. "Oh, answer it," she said, clapping her hands together. "She said she might call today with exciting news." I looked at the phone, then at my parents' expectant faces, and felt a sinking sensation in my stomach that had nothing to do with the pot roast. With a growing sense of dread, I swiped to answer. Jimmy. Sarah's voice bubbled through the speaker with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for lottery winners. Huh. Is the whole family there? Put me on speaker. I have the most amazing announcement. I reluctantly switched to speakerphone and set it in the center of the table. Sarah's voice filled the dining room with the same energy she'd brought to every family gathering since she could walk. Mom, Dad, Jimmy, are you all sitting down? Because what I'm about to tell you is going to blow your minds. Mom leaned forward like Sarah was about to reveal the secrets of the universe. What is it, sweetheart? Brad and I are pregnant, Sarah squealed, and I could practically hear her bouncing through the phone. We just found out yesterday and we're absolutely over the moon. Mom burst into tears of joy, and Dad's face broke into the first genuine smile I'd seen from him all evening. Despite the tension of the previous conversation, I felt a warm flutter of happiness for my sister. Sarah had always talked about wanting kids, and she and Brad had been married for 6 months now. That's wonderful news, honey, Mom said through her tears. When are you due? The doctor says late March, so we've got about 7 months to get everything ready. Which brings me to the second part of my news. Sarah's voice took on a tone I recognized from childhood, the one she'd used when asking for a pony or a bigger allowance. Brad and I have been looking at houses, and we found the most perfect place in Riverside Heights. It's got 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and the most gorgeous nursery space you've ever seen. I felt my stomach drop as I recognized the neighborhood name. Riverside Heights was the kind of area where houses started at $400,000 and went up from there. The thing is, Sarah continued, oblivious to the financial bomb she was about to drop. We need help with the down payment. It's only $40,000, which I know sounds like a lot, but when you spread it out over the next 30 years, it's really quite reasonable. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched Mom's face cycle through confusion, panic, and something that looked like physical pain. Dad opened and closed his mouth like a fish gasping for air. 40,000, Mom finally managed to whisper. I know it's a big number, but think about it as an investment in your grandchild's future, Sarah said brightly. The school district in Riverside Heights is rated 10 out of 10, and the property values just keep going up. Plus, Brad and I both got raises recently, so we can easily afford the monthly payments once we get past this initial hurdle. Before anyone could respond, I heard a car door slam through the phone, followed by footsteps and voices in the background. Oh, perfect, Brad's here, and he's got the real estate listings with him. We thought we'd swing by and show you the pictures of our dream house. We're actually standing in your driveway right now. The line went dead, leaving the 3 of us staring at the phone in stunned silence. Within seconds, we heard Sarah's key turning in the front door, followed by her voice calling out, "We're here, and we brought champagne to celebrate." Sarah burst into the dining room like a force of nature, her blonde hair perfectly styled and her smile bright enough to power a small city. Brad followed behind her, carrying a bottle of champagne in one hand and a manila folder thick with papers in the other. Sorry to interrupt dinner, Brad said with his usual easy smile, but Sarah was too excited to wait until tomorrow to share the news. Sarah had already moved to hug Mom, who was still wiping tears from her eyes. Mom, you're crying. I knew you'd be happy, but I didn't expect you to be this emotional. I'm just so proud of you, sweetheart, Mom said, her voice thick with emotions I couldn't begin to untangle. Brad set the champagne on the table and opened the folder, spreading out glossy real estate photographs like he was dealing cards. Wait until you see this place. It's absolutely perfect for starting a family. The photos showed a sprawling colonial-style house with white columns and a wraparound porch. The kind of house that belonged in magazines about successful young families living the American dream. Look at this kitchen, Sarah gushed, pointing to a photo of granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. And this is the master bedroom with a walk-in closet bigger than our current bedroom. But the best part is the nursery. She flipped to a photo of a sun-drenched room with built-in shelving and windows overlooking a manicured backyard. Can you imagine our little one taking their first steps in this room? Dad picked up one of the photos with shaking hands, studying it like he was trying to memorize every detail. It's beautiful, honey. Really beautiful. The neighborhood is incredible, too, Brad added, pulling up something on his phone. There's a park 3 blocks away and the elementary school is within walking distance. The homeowners association maintains all the common areas, so we won't have to worry about lawn care or snow removal. How much did you say the down payment was? Mom asked in a voice so small I had to strain to hear it. $40,000, Sarah repeated cheerfully. Which I know seems like a lot, but we've already talked to the mortgage broker, and with your co-signature we can get a fantastic interest rate. The monthly payments will only be $2,800, which is totally manageable with our combined salaries. I felt like I was watching a car accident in slow motion. Sarah had no idea that our parents were 3 months behind on their own mortgage, and here she was, asking them to co-sign for a house that cost more than they'd paid for theirs 25 years ago. Co-signature, Dad repeated weakly. Just a formality, Brad said, waving his hand dismissively. Since you guys clearly have your finances in order, the bank just needs your names on the paperwork to guarantee the loan. It's not like you'd ever actually be responsible for the payments or anything. Sarah pulled out her phone and started scrolling through photos. Oh, and I've already been looking at nursery furniture. There's this amazing crib that converts into a toddler bed, and then into a full-size bed. It's only $1,200, but it's an investment piece that will last for years. $1,200 for a crib. I couldn't keep the shock out of my voice. For a furniture system, Sarah corrected, giving me the same look she'd perfected as a teenager when I questioned her shopping habits. And that's not including the changing table, dresser, rocking chair, and bookshelf. The whole nursery set is about $4,000, but again, it's quality furniture that will last through multiple children. Mom made a strangled sound that might have been a cough or might have been a suppressed sob. Sarah didn't notice too, caught up in her own excitement to read the room. We're also thinking about hiring a decorator, she continued. I found this woman who specializes in children's spaces, and she has the most amazing ideas for creating a calming, nurturing environment that promotes healthy sleep patterns and cognitive development. How much does a decorator cost? Dad asked, though he looked like he already regretted the question. Her consultation fee is $500, but that includes a complete design plan and shopping list. Then the actual implementation depends on how elaborate we want to go. Probably somewhere between $3,000 and $8,000, depending on whether we do custom window treatments and wall murals. I watched my parents exchange another one of those loaded looks, the kind that carried entire conversations in a single glance. The weight of their financial situation seemed to grow heavier with every dollar amount that came out of Sarah's mouth. There's one more thing, Sarah said, her voice taking on a slightly different tone. Brad made a really brave decision this week. Tell them, honey. Brad's smile widened as he put his arm around Sarah's waist. I quit my day job at the insurance company. With the baby coming and the new house, I want to focus entirely on my music career. Sarah and I both agree that life's too short to waste time on work that doesn't fulfill your soul. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Brad had quit his job, his stable benefits providing salary-paying job that had been contributing to their household income. You quit, I said, probably louder than necessary. I gave my 2 weeks' notice on Friday, Brad said proudly. I've got 3 gigs lined up for next month, and my buddy Derek thinks he can get me a regular spot at the Bluegrass Cafe downtown. Plus, I've been working on some original songs that I think have real commercial potential. Sarah beamed at him like he'd just announced he'd been offered a record deal with a major label. I'm so proud of him for following his dreams. And with my promotion at the marketing firm, we'll be fine financially. Especially once we're in the new house and can start building equity instead of throwing money away on rent. What promotion? Mom asked, latching on to what seemed like the only potentially positive financial news in the conversation. Oh, it's not official yet, Sarah said with a dismissive wave. but my boss hinted that there might be opportunities for advancement in the next quarter. And even if that doesn't work out right away, I'm confident that we can make the numbers work. We're young, we're motivated, and we have family support. She looked around the table expectantly, waiting for the enthusiastic response that had probably been automatic for most of their lives. Instead, she found three faces staring back at her, with expressions ranging from concern to barely controlled panic. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked, her confident smile faltering for the first time since she'd walked through the door. "I thought you'd be excited about becoming grandparents and helping us take this next step in our lives." The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was about to rage out of control. I watched Mom struggle with how to respond, her mouth opening and closing as she searched for words that wouldn't shatter her daughter's dreams or reveal the family's desperate financial situation. "We are excited." Mom finally managed, her voice strained with the effort of maintaining normalcy. "It's just a lot to process all at once." Dad nodded too enthusiastically, like a bobblehead doll in an earthquake. $40,000 is a significant amount of money, sweetheart. We'd need some time to figure out the logistics. Sarah's expression shifted from confusion to something that looked dangerously close to hurt. Time. What kind of time? The sellers are looking at multiple offers, and our real estate agent says we need to move quickly if we want this house. How quickly? I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew the answer. "We need to submit our offer with proof of down payment funds by Wednesday," Brad said, consulting his phone. "So basically we need confirmation by tomorrow that the money will be available." "Tomorrow," Dad repeated, his voice jumping an octave. "I know it's short notice," Sarah said, reaching across the table to squeeze Mom's hand. "But this house is perfect for us, and in this market, good properties don't stay available long. The listing agent said there are already 2 other couples interested." I felt like I was watching my family get pulled into a financial whirlpool. Sarah had no idea that asking for $40,000 was like asking my parents to perform surgery with garden tools. Not only did they not have the money, but co-signing a loan in their current financial state would be like jumping out of an airplane without checking if their parachute was packed properly. I started carefully. "Have you and Brad looked at any less expensive options? Maybe something that needs a little work, but has good bones." "Less expensive?" Sarah laughed, but there was an edge to it. "Jimmy, we're not college students anymore. We're adults starting a family, and we deserve to live somewhere nice. Besides, Brad's going to be working from home now, so we need space for his music studio." "Music studio?" Mom asked weakly. "Just a converted bedroom where I can practice and record," Brad explained. "Nothing fancy, but I'll need proper acoustics if I'm going to take my career to the next level. The house we're looking at has a perfect room in the basement that's already partially soundproofed." Sarah stood up and began pacing around the dining room, her excitement building again, despite the lukewarm response from her audience. "Mom, do you remember when I was little and you used to tell me I could be anything I wanted to be? That I deserved the best life had to offer?" Mom nodded, tears forming in her eyes again. "Well, this is it." Sarah continued, gesturing toward the real estate photos. "This is my chance to give my child the kind of childhood I had, with a beautiful home and parents who aren't stressed about money all the time. You and Dad worked so hard to give me and Jimmy everything we needed, and now I want to do the same for my baby." The irony was so thick you could spread it on toast. Sarah was talking about not being stressed about money while asking our financially drowning parents to co-sign a loan that could potentially ruin their credit and cost them their own home. "Honey," Dad said, clearing his throat nervously, "maybe we should sit down and talk about this more privately. Family finances can be complicated, and there are things you might not be aware of." "What things?" Sarah stopped pacing and fixed her father with a stare that could have melted steel. "Are you saying you can't afford it? Because I know that's not true. You paid for my entire wedding without even blinking, and that was way more than $40,000. I watched Dad's face crumble as he realized his daughter had no concept of what that wedding had actually cost them. Not just in dollars, but in their financial security and peace of mind. The wedding was different, Mom said quietly. That was a one-time expense. So is a house down payment, Sarah shot back. It's not like we're asking you to pay our mortgage every month. We just need help getting started, and then we'll take care of everything ourselves. What if something goes wrong? I asked. What if Brad's music career doesn't take off as quickly as you hope? What if you don't get that promotion? What if there are complications with the pregnancy and you have unexpected medical bills? Sarah whirled around to face me, her cheeks flushed with anger. Why are you being so negative? Why can't you just be happy for us and supportive like a brother should be? Because I'm trying to be realistic, I replied, feeling my own temper starting to fray. Buying a house is the biggest financial commitment most people ever make, and you're talking about doing it based on a promotion you might get and income from gigs that may or may not happen. Brad is extremely talented, Sarah said defensively. He's been playing guitar for 15 years, and everyone who hears him says he's got what it takes to make it professionally. I'm not questioning Brad's talent, I said, trying to keep my voice level. I'm questioning the wisdom of quitting a steady job to pursue music right when you're about to take on a mortgage and have a baby. Some people believe in taking calculated risks to achieve their dreams, Brad said, speaking up for the first time since the conversation had turned tense. I know it might seem scary to someone who's chosen a more traditional path, but not everyone wants to spend their whole life playing it safe. The implication stung. Brad was basically calling me boring and unambitious for being an accountant with a steady job and a retirement plan. Never mind that my steady job was apparently the only thing keeping my parents from losing their house. Playing it safe has its advantages, I replied coolly. Like being able to pay your bills and not having to ask your family to bail you out when your dreams don't immediately translate into income. Bail us out. Sarah's voice rose to a pitch that probably made every dog in the neighborhood perk up their ears. We're not asking anyone to bail us out. We're asking for help with a down payment, which is completely normal for young couples starting out. With what guarantee that you'll be able to make the monthly payments? With the guarantee that we're responsible adults who know how to manage our finances, Sarah snapped. Not everyone needs to live in a studio apartment and drive a 10-year-old Honda because they're terrified of taking any financial risks. That hit below the belt, and we both knew it. Sarah was attacking my lifestyle choices, which were actually the result of careful budgeting and long-term planning. The same planning that had allowed me to help our parents without even realizing it. You know what, I said, standing up from the table. Maybe you should know exactly where that down payment money would be coming from. Jimmy, don't, Dad warned, but I was past the point of protecting anyone's feelings. For the past 8 months, I've been sending Mom and Dad $500 a month thinking it was for a family vacation fund. What I found out tonight is that money has actually been keeping them from losing this house. Sarah's mouth fell open. What are you talking about? Mom and Dad are 3 months behind on their mortgage payments. Dad's auto shop is failing, and they spent their entire savings on your wedding. They've been too proud to tell you that they're drowning financially and too scared to admit they need help. That's not true, Sarah said, but her voice had lost its confident edge. She looked back and forth between our parents, searching their faces for some sign that I was making it all up. Tell her, Dad, I said quietly. Tell her about the $4,200 you owe in back payments. Tell her about the foreclosure notice that's probably sitting in your mailbox right now. Dad's shoulders sagged in defeat. It's true, sweetheart. We didn't want to worry you, especially with the wedding and everything. We thought we could handle it ourselves. Sarah sank into her chair like someone had cut her strings. You're broke. We're not broke, Mom said quickly. We're just going through a rough patch. These things happen to families sometimes. How rough? Brad asked, and I could see him doing mental calculations about what this meant for their house plans. Rough enough that co-signing a loan for you would probably get rejected immediately, I said bluntly. Banks don't give mortgages to people who are already behind on their existing mortgage payments. Sarah stared at the real estate photos scattered across the table like they were written in a foreign language. So, you can't help us? It's not that we don't want to, Mom said desperately. It's that we literally can't. We don't have the money and we can't qualify to co-sign anything right now. But the wedding, Sarah said weakly. You paid for the whole thing without hesitation. We paid for it with credit cards and a loan against the house, Dad admitted. We wanted to give you the perfect day, and we figured we'd worry about paying for it later. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. I watched Sarah process this information, her face cycling through disbelief, anger, and something that might have been guilt. So, when you were walking me down the aisle and giving that speech about how proud you were to see me start my new life, she said slowly, you were actually going into debt that you couldn't afford. Dad nodded miserably. We wanted you to be happy. And now you're losing the house. Not if I can help it, I said, surprising myself with the determination in my voice. But it's going to require some serious changes in how this family handles money. Sarah looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something between gratitude and resentment. What kind of changes? Before I could answer, Brad stood up and began gathering the real estate photos. Maybe we should head home and let you all work this out as a family. No, Sarah said firmly. I want to hear what Jimmy has to say. Apparently, he's been supporting this family longer than I have. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Instead of reviewing quarterly tax returns, I spent the day digging into my family's financial situation, like an investigator working a fraud case. What I discovered made my stomach churn with a mixture of anger and disbelief. I started by calling Brad directly, figuring he deserved to know the truth about what he'd married into. We met for coffee at a diner near his apartment, and I could tell from his expression that he'd spent a sleepless night processing the previous evening's revelations. I had no idea, he said before I'd even sat down. Sarah always talked about how well your parents were doing. She showed me pictures of their house, their cars, the way they'd paid for the wedding without asking for any help from my family. I honestly thought they were loaded. What exactly did she tell you? Brad stirred his coffee nervously, avoiding eye contact. She said your dad owned multiple auto repair shops and that your mom had inherited some money from her parents. She mentioned something about investment properties and a vacation home in the mountains. I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. Multiple shops, investment properties. Brad, my dad owns one struggling garage and my mom works part-time at the public library for $12 an hour. They've never owned anything except the house they're about to lose. She showed me bank statements, Brad insisted. Account balances with like $50,000 in checking and savings. When was this? Right before we got engaged. Maybe a year ago, she said she wanted to be transparent about family finances since we were talking about marriage and combining our lives. A terrible suspicion began forming in my mind. Did these bank statements have my parents' names on them or just account numbers? Brad frowned, trying to remember. I think just account numbers. Sarah said her parents were old-fashioned about privacy, so she'd blocked out their personal information. But the balances were definitely real. I saw them with my own eyes. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my banking app until I found what I was looking for. Brad, what's today's date? November 15th, why? Look at this, I said, showing him my screen. This is my checking account balance as of this morning, $47,000. Brad stared at the screen, and I watched his face change as understanding dawned. Oh no. She showed me your bank statements, didn't she? That would be my guess. Sarah's had access to my financial information for years because I used to help her with her taxes and loan applications. She probably screenshotted my account balances and told you they belong to our parents. Why would she do that? Because Sarah has spent her entire life believing that money problems are something that happens to other people. She's never had to worry about paying rent or buying groceries or choosing between health insurance and car repairs. The idea that our parents might not be able to afford something she wants is literally outside her comprehension. Brad pushed his coffee away like it had suddenly turned bitter. She lied to me about your family's financial situation to make herself look better. I don't think she saw it as lying. I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. I think she told herself that our parents must have money because they've always been able to provide for her. She probably convinced herself that those bank statements represented some kind of family wealth that everyone was sharing. But she had to know they weren't your parents' accounts. Did she? Sarah's never paid much attention to financial details. She knows I work in accounting and that I'm good with money, but she's never asked about my salary or my savings goals. For all I know, she assumes I make minimum wage and live paycheck to paycheck because I don't spend money on designer clothes and expensive vacations. Brad was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. What else don't I know about my wife? That was exactly the question I was afraid he'd ask, because I had a feeling the answer was going to get worse before it got better. After Brad left, I drove to my parents' house and asked to see all their financial documents. What I found was even more disturbing than I'd expected. Hidden in a shoebox in Dad's closet were credit card statements showing thousands of dollars in cash advances, all taken within the past 6 months. "Dad, what is this?" I asked, spreading the statements across their kitchen table. "We needed the money to keep up with Sarah's expenses," Mom said quietly. The wedding wasn't the only thing. There were the engagement party costs, the bridal shower, the bachelorette weekend in Las Vegas, the rehearsal dinner. I added up the numbers in my head and felt sick. "You spent over $30,000 on Sarah's wedding-related events?" She kept asking for help with little things, Dad explained. "A few hundred here for the flower arrangements, 1,000 there for the photographer's travel expenses. It never seemed like that much at the time. But you were putting it all on credit cards." "We thought we'd be able to pay it back gradually," Mom said. "The shop was doing okay then, and I was working more hours at the library. We figured it was an investment in Sarah's happiness." I picked up another statement and felt my blood pressure spike. "What's this charge for $4,000 to Elite Wedding Consultants?" "Sarah wanted a wedding planner," Dad said defensively. "She said all her friends had professional planners and she didn't want her wedding to look cheap in comparison. And this one for $1,500 to Luxury Limo Services." "Transportation for the wedding party. Sarah said it wasn't safe for everyone to drive themselves after the reception." I kept finding charges that made my head spin. $2,000 for a videographer. $1,200 for specialty linens. $800 for custom cocktail napkins with Sarah and Brad's names printed in gold foil. Did Sarah know you were going into debt for all of this? Mom and Dad exchanged another one of their loaded looks. We didn't want to burden her with our financial concerns on her special day. "So she has no idea what her wedding actually cost you." "We told her not to worry about money," Mom said. "We said we'd take care of everything and she should just focus on being happy." I felt like I was trying to solve a puzzle where half the pieces were missing. "Have you told her about any of the financial problems you've been having since then?" "We didn't want her to feel guilty," Dad said. "She's newlywed and starting her life with Brad. The last thing she needs is to worry about her old parents' money troubles." I stared at them in disbelief. "So you've been protecting Sarah from the consequences of her choices while letting yourselves sink deeper into debt?" "It's not her fault we're having financial difficulties," Mom said defensively. "The wedding was our gift to her." "A gift you couldn't afford that's now threatening your ability to keep your house." "We made our choices," Dad said firmly. "Sarah shouldn't have to suffer because we overextended ourselves." I was starting to understand the toxic dynamic that had been developing in my family for years. My parents had trained Sarah to expect unlimited financial support without ever explaining the cost or limitations. She'd learned to see their willingness to pay for things as evidence of their wealth rather than evidence of their love and sacrifice. But the more I dug into the paperwork, the more I realized the problem was even bigger than wedding debt and mortgage payments. Hidden among the credit card statements were receipts for things that made no sense for people in financial crisis. "What's this charge for $800 to Nordstrom from last month?" Mom looked embarrassed. "Sarah needed a new outfit for a work event. She said it was important for her career advancement." "And this one for $600 to William Sonoma. Wedding gifts for her friends. Sarah said it would be rude to give cheap presents when everyone had been so generous to her and Brad." I felt like I was looking at evidence of systematic financial abuse, except the victim was enabling the abuser. Mom, Dad, do you realize that Sarah has been using you as her personal bank account? She's our daughter, Mom said, tears starting to form in her eyes. What kind of parents would we be if we didn't help her when she needs it? The kind who teach their children about financial responsibility and realistic expectations, I replied, probably more harshly than necessary. I spent the rest of the afternoon going through every statement and receipt I could find. The pattern was always the same. Sarah would call with some expense or emergency, my parents would find a way to pay for it without asking questions, and Sarah would move on to the next request without ever acknowledging the growing burden she was placing on their finances. The final piece of the puzzle came when I found a folder labeled Sarah's Account in Dad's filing cabinet. Inside were copies of loan applications, cosigner agreements, and bank statements going back 3 years. My parents had been co-signing loans for Sarah since she graduated college, helping her buy a car, rent an apartment, and even pay off credit card debt from shopping sprees and vacations. But the most disturbing document was at the bottom of the stack. It was a loan application for $25,000 dated just 2 months ago, with both my parents' signatures and Sarah's name as the primary borrower. "What is this?" I asked, holding up the application. Dad looked like he'd been caught stealing from the church collection plate. Sarah needed money to pay off some debts before the wedding. She said it would look bad if she and Brad started their marriage with outstanding credit card balances. "So you co-signed a loan to pay off her shopping debts." "We thought it was responsible financial planning," Mom said weakly. "Did Sarah make any payments on this loan?" "She's supposed to start next month," Dad said. "The loan officer said she could defer payments until after her honeymoon." I felt like I was drowning in the magnitude of my family's financial dysfunction. Sarah wasn't just asking for help with a house down payment. She was asking parents who were already drowning in debt from her previous request to take on even more financial responsibility for her choices. As I drove home that evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd only scratched the surface of the problem. If Sarah had been lying to Brad about our parents' financial situation, and if she'd been manipulating Mom and Dad into funding her lifestyle for years, what else was she hiding? I was about to find out that the truth was even worse than I'd imagined. I called Sarah the next morning and asked her to meet me for lunch. She suggested a trendy bistro downtown that charged $25 for salads and $38 for artisanal sandwiches. The irony wasn't lost on me. Sarah arrived 15 minutes late, carrying shopping bags from 3 different boutiques and wearing a coat I was pretty sure cost more than my monthly car payment. She hugged me like nothing had changed since our family dinner disaster, but I could see wariness in her eyes. "Sorry I'm late," she said, settling into the booth across from me. "I had to stop by the bank to sort out some account issues. You know how complicated banking can be." "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about banking," I said, pulling out the folder I'd compiled from my investigation. "Specifically about some statements you showed Brad before you got engaged." Sarah's smile flickered for just a second before returning to full brightness. "I don't know what you mean." "Bank statements with $50,000 balances that you told him belonged to Mom and Dad." "Oh, those," Sarah said with a dismissive laugh. "I might have gotten confused about which accounts were which. You know I've never been good with financial details." I placed a printout of my checking account statement on the table between us. "These are my account numbers, Sarah. You showed your fiancé my financial information and told him it belonged to our parents." Sarah's face flushed, but she maintained her composure. "It was a misunderstanding. I was trying to reassure Brad that our family was financially stable, and I grabbed the wrong paperwork." For a year, Sarah, you maintained this misunderstanding for an entire year. "I didn't think it mattered," she said, her voice taking on a defensive edge. "The point was to show that our family doesn't have money problems, which is true. Dad owns a successful business. Mom has a good job and you're doing well as an accountant. What difference does it make whose specific bank account Brad saw?" I stared at her in disbelief. "The difference is that you built your relationship on a lie. You told your husband that our parents were wealthy when they're actually on the verge of bankruptcy. They're not on the verge of bankruptcy, Sarah snapped. They're going through a temporary rough patch which happens to everyone. It has nothing to do with me or my relationship with Brad. It has everything to do with you, Sarah. Do you want to know how much Mom and Dad have spent on you in the past 3 years? Sarah's eyes narrowed. They've helped me out occasionally like parents do for their children. That's what families are supposed to do for each other. I opened my folder and began reading from the list I'd compiled. Your wedding, $32,000. Your car down payment, $8,000. Credit card debt payoff, $15,000. Various shopping emergencies, vacation expenses, and what you called career investments, $12,000. The loan they co-signed for you 2 months ago, $25,000. Those weren't gifts, Sarah said, but her voice had lost some of its confidence. Those were loans and investments in my future. When was the last time you made a payment on any of those loans, E? Sarah's silence was answer enough. Sarah, you've taken over $90,000 from our parents in 3 years, and you've never paid back a single penny. Meanwhile, they've been falling behind on their own bills and going into debt to maintain the illusion that they can afford to support your lifestyle. I didn't ask them to do any of that, she said, but there were tears forming in her eyes. I never told them to go into debt for me. But you never asked if they could afford it, either did you? You never asked about their financial situation or offered to contribute to the costs. You just assumed they had unlimited resources because they were always willing to help. Sarah wiped her eyes with her napkin, smearing her carefully applied mascara. They always said not to worry about money. They told me to focus on my happiness and my future, and they'd take care of the rest. And it never occurred to you that they might be sacrificing their own financial security to give you what you wanted. Parents are supposed to help their children, she said, but the conviction was gone from her voice. That's what love means. When you care about someone, you make sacrifices for them. You're right, I said. Parents do make sacrifices for their children. But children who love their parents don't take advantage of those sacrifices. They don't keep asking for more money when they know their parents are struggling. I didn't know they were struggling. Because you never bothered to find out. Sarah, when was the last time you asked Mom and Dad how they were doing financially? When was the last time you offered to help them with anything instead of asking them to help you? Sarah stared down at her hands, and I could see her mentally reviewing years of interactions with our parents. They never said they needed help. They always seemed happy to give me whatever I needed. Of course they seemed happy. They love you and they didn't want you to feel bad about asking, but that doesn't mean they could afford to keep giving. A long silence stretched between us as Sarah processed this information. When she finally looked up, there was something different in her expression. What am I supposed to do now? She asked quietly. Brad and I already put in an offer on the house. We told the realtor we'd have the down payment by Wednesday. You withdraw the offer and start looking for something you can actually afford without your parents' help. But we love that house. It's perfect for our family. Sarah, you don't have a family yet. You have a pregnancy and a husband who just quit his job to pursue a music career. You need to start making decisions based on reality, not on fantasy. Sarah's face hardened again. So I'm supposed to give up my dreams because Mom and Dad made poor financial choices. I felt my temper flare. Your dreams. Sarah, your dreams have been funded by our parents going into debt and me unknowingly paying their mortgage. Your dreams are built on other people's sacrifice, and you've never even acknowledged the cost. I didn't ask you to pay their mortgage. But you're fine with benefiting from it, aren't you? You're happy to keep asking for money as long as someone else is making sure it's available. Sarah stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the restaurant floor. I don't have to listen to this. I'm not responsible for Mom and Dad's financial problems, and I'm not going to let you blame me for their poor planning. Sit down, Sarah. We're not done talking. Yes, we are. She grabbed her purse and shopping bags, but I could see her hands shaking. I came here hoping you'd be supportive like a brother should be, but instead you're attacking me and trying to make me feel guilty for accepting help from my parents. I'm trying to make you understand the consequences of your choices. My choices. Sarah's voice rose enough to attract attention from nearby tables. What about your choices? Jimmy. What about the choice to be a boring, judgmental accountant who thinks everyone else should live like a monk? What about the choice to stay single and childless so you can hoard your money instead of sharing it with family? The words hit like physical blows, but I forced myself to stay calm. This isn't about my life choices, Sarah. This is about you taking responsibility for the financial damage you've done to our family. Financial damage? I haven't damaged anything. I've accepted help that was freely offered by parents who wanted to see me happy and successful, at the cost of their own financial stability. Sarah leaned across the table, her face flushed with anger. Maybe if you contributed more to this family instead of just criticizing everyone else's choices, Mom and Dad wouldn't be having money problems. I've been contributing $500 a month for the past 8 months, Sarah. The only reason our parents aren't homeless right now is because of my contributions. Well, congratulations, she said sarcastically. You want a medal for doing the bare minimum? I felt something snap inside me. The bare minimum, Sarah. I've been supporting our parents without even knowing it, while you've been bleeding them dry for years. I've been living within my means and building a stable financial foundation while you've been treating our family like your personal ATM. And now you want to bring a child into this dysfunction. Sarah's face went white. Don't you dare question my ability to be a mother. I'm not questioning your ability to be a mother. I'm questioning your ability to be a financially responsible parent when you've never been a financially responsible daughter or sister. You know what, Jimmy? I think I know what this is really about. Sarah's voice turned cold and calculating. You're jealous that Mom and Dad have always loved me more. You're bitter that they've been willing to invest in my happiness while treating you like the responsible one who doesn't need help. The accusation stung because there was probably some truth to it. Growing up, Sarah had always been the favored child, the one who got away with everything while I was held to higher standards. But that wasn't what this was about. This isn't about favoritism, Sarah. This is about you being old enough to understand that actions have consequences and that love doesn't mean unlimited financial support, says the man who's never taken a risk in his entire life. Sarah gathered her things and stood up again. You wouldn't understand what it's like to have dreams and ambitions because you've chosen to live small and safe. Small and safe. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Sarah, I own my apartment outright. I have 6 months of expenses in my emergency fund. I'm maxing out my retirement contributions every year. I call that responsible, not small. I call it sad, Sarah replied. When's the last time you went on vacation? Jimmy. When's the last time you bought something just because you wanted it? When's the last time you took a chance on something that might make you happy? When's the last time you paid your own bills without asking our parents for help? Sarah's mouth opened and closed a few times, but no words came out. Finally, she turned and walked toward the restaurant exit. But just before she reached the door, she turned back with an expression I'd never seen before. You want to know something, Jimmy? You're right. I have been taking money from Mom and Dad for years without thinking about whether they could afford it. But you know what else is true. I waited, dreading whatever was coming next. I've been sleeping with my boss for the past 6 months, and there's a chance this baby isn't even Brad's. Her voice was perfectly steady, like she was commenting on the weather. So, maybe you should worry less about my financial responsibility and more about whether your precious family values are as solid as you think they are. With that, she walked out of the restaurant, leaving me sitting alone with the wreckage of everything I thought I knew about my sister. I sat in that restaurant booth for 20 minutes after Sarah left, trying to process what she'd just confessed. The revelation about her affair felt like a grenade exploding in the middle of an already devastating battlefield. But as the initial shock wore off, I realized that Sarah's confession had actually revealed something important. She was spinning completely out of control, and someone needed to stop her before she destroyed not just our parents' financial future, but Brad's life and her unborn child's future as well. I paid for lunch and drove straight to Brad's apartment. He answered the door looking like he hadn't slept, wearing the same clothes from our coffee meeting, and sporting 2 days' worth of stubble. Jimmy, is everything okay? Did you find out more about your parents' situation? We need to talk, I said. And this time, Sarah needs to be here to hear it. She's not here. She went shopping this morning and said she wouldn't be back until evening. She seemed upset about something. Call her. Tell her to come home now. Tell her it's a family emergency. Brad looked confused but pulled out his phone. I listened to him leave a voicemail asking Sarah to come home, immediately saying I was at their apartment with important information about the house situation. While we waited, I decided Brad deserved to know at least part of what I'd discovered. Brad, I need to ask you some direct questions, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay, he said nervously. How much money do you and Sarah have in savings right now? Maybe $3,000. We spent most of our wedding money on the honeymoon and setting up the apartment. What about income? With your job situation changing and Sarah's pregnancy, what are your realistic monthly expenses? Brad looked uncomfortable. Well, our rent is $1,800. Car payments are about $400 combined. Insurance, groceries, utilities, probably another $800. So maybe $3,000 a month minimum. And your projected income? Sarah makes about $4,000 a month at her marketing job, assuming she keeps working after the baby. My gigs bring in maybe $500 or $600 on a good month, but it's inconsistent. I did the math in my head. Even if everything went perfectly, they were looking at breaking even every month with no room for unexpected expenses, medical bills, or the $1,000 monthly mortgage payment they'd be taking on with their dream house. Brad, has Sarah ever mentioned any financial help from her family, other than the wedding and this potential house down payment? Not really. She's always said her family was well off and that money wasn't something she had to worry about growing up. Why? Before I could answer, Sarah burst through the apartment door carrying even more shopping bags than she'd had at lunch. She stopped short when she saw me sitting on their couch. What are you doing here? She demanded. I called a family meeting, I said. The three of us need to have an honest conversation about finances, expectations, and the future. I already told you I'm not interested in your financial advice. This isn't advice, Sarah. This is intervention. I opened my folder and spread documents across their coffee table. Bank statements, loan applications, credit card bills, and the list of expenses I'd compiled from my parents' records. Brad, I want you to see exactly what Sarah's relationship with our family's money looks like. Sarah lunged forward, trying to gather up the papers. You have no right to share private family information. These documents show that our parents have given Sarah over $90,000 in the past 3 years. I continued, holding her back. None of it has been repaid. Meanwhile, they've been falling behind on their own bills and are now facing foreclosure. Brad stared at the papers like they were written in hieroglyphics. $90,000. Wedding expenses, car payments, debt consolidation, shopping emergencies, and various other financial assistance that Sarah has never mentioned to you. Sarah, Brad looked at his wife with confusion and growing alarm. Is this true? It's not what it looks like, Sarah said quickly. Those weren't gifts. They were family investments and temporary loans. Jimmy is twisting everything to make me look bad. Then explain it to me, Brad said quietly. Help me understand what this all means. Sarah opened her mouth several times but seemed unable to form words. The confident, manipulative woman from the restaurant had been replaced by someone who looked cornered and desperate. Here's what it means, Brad, I said. It means Sarah has been living a lifestyle funded by our parents' financial sacrifice, and she's never told you the true cost. The wedding you thought was paid for with their savings. It was paid for with debt that's now threatening their ability to keep their house. The financial security you thought you were marrying into, it doesn't exist. But the bank statements, Brad protested weakly. I saw account balances. You saw my account balances. Sarah showed you my financial information and told you it belonged to our parents. Brad sank into a chair like someone had cut his strings. You lied to me about your family's money. I didn't lie, Sarah said desperately. I just wanted you to feel secure about our future together. I knew the family would be able to help us if we needed it, so it didn't seem important to explain all the specific details. What specific details? Brad's voice was getting louder. What else haven't you told me? Sarah looked at me with pleading eyes, but I wasn't going to rescue her from the consequences of her choices. Not anymore. Sarah, Brad deserves to know the truth about everything, all of it. What truth? Brad demanded. Sarah, what is he talking about? Sarah burst into tears, but they felt manipulative rather than genuine. I made some mistakes, but I was going to fix everything once we got settled in the new house and I got my promotion. What mistakes? I've been gambling online, she confessed through her sobs. Just small amounts at first, trying to make some extra money to help with expenses. But I got in over my head and I had to ask my parents for help to cover the losses. Brad's face went through several different expressions before settling on something that looked like nausea. How much money did you lose gambling? Maybe $10,000 or $12,000, but I've stopped and I'm going to pay it all back. With what money? I asked. You just quit your job. Remember, I didn't quit my job, Sarah said quickly. I'm taking maternity leave. Brad said slowly. You're only 2 months pregnant. Maternity leave doesn't start until the baby is born. The room fell silent except for Sarah's increasingly frantic breathing. I realized we'd reached the moment where all her lies and manipulations were going to come crashing down at once. Tell him about your boss, I said quietly. Sarah's face went completely white. Jimmy, please don't. Tell him about the affair, Sarah. Tell him why you're not sure whose baby you're carrying. Brad stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. What did he just say? Sarah collapsed onto their couch, sobbing in a way that finally seemed genuine. I'm sorry, Brad. I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. Are you having an affair? It's over now, Sarah said through her tears. It was a mistake, and I ended it as soon as I found out I was pregnant. Whose baby is it? I don't know, Sarah whispered. I won't know until after it's born and we can do a paternity test. Brad stared at his wife like she was a stranger. You've been lying to me about everything. Your family's money, your gambling, your affair. What else don't I know about you? Nothing else, Sarah said desperately. I know this looks bad, but we can work through this. Couples overcome infidelity all the time. We can go to counseling and I'll pay back every penny I owe your parents and we'll start fresh. With what money? Brad repeated my earlier question. Sarah, you just told me you've been gambling away thousands of dollars and having an affair with your boss. How exactly do you plan to pay anyone back? I'll get a different job. I'll work 2 jobs if I have to. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. I watched Brad process everything he'd learned in the span of 10 minutes. His wife had been lying about her family's wealth, taking money from financially struggling parents, gambling away their savings, and cheating on him with her boss. The baby she was carrying might not even be his. I need some air, Brad said finally. I need to think about this. Don't leave me, Sarah begged. Please, Brad, we can fix this together. I don't know if we can fix this, Sarah. I don't even know who you are anymore. Brad grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. Before he left, he turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Thank you for telling me the truth, he said. I wish I'd known all of this before we got married, but at least I know now. After Brad left, Sarah turned to me with a mixture of anger and desperation. Are you happy now? You've destroyed my marriage and ruined any chance I had of fixing things with our family? I didn't destroy anything, Sarah. I just stopped enabling your destructive behavior. What am I supposed to do now? How am I supposed to support myself and a baby with no job and no husband? You're supposed to start taking responsibility for your choices and figure out how to rebuild your life based on reality instead of fantasy. Sarah wiped her eyes and looked at me with something that might have been respect for the first time in years. You're really not going to rescue me from this, are you? No, Sarah, I'm not. But I will help you figure out a path forward if you're ready to be honest about your situation and committed to making real changes. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the financial documents scattered across her coffee table. What kind of changes? The kind that start with admitting you have a problem and end with you becoming someone our parents can be proud of instead of financially afraid of. For the first time since our family dinner 3 days ago, Sarah looked like she was actually listening. 6 months later, I sat in the same diner where I'd met with Brad. But this time the atmosphere was completely different. Across from me sat a woman who looked like my sister, but carried herself with a maturity I'd never seen before. Sarah's pregnancy was showing now a gentle curve beneath her simple sweater that she touched occasionally with protective hands. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore minimal makeup. The expensive clothes and designer accessories had been replaced with outfits from Target and thrift stores. "How are Mom and Dad doing?" she asked, stirring honey into her tea. "Better than they have in years," I replied honestly. Dad sold the auto shop to his assistant manager and is working part-time at the Ford dealership downtown. Less stress, steady income, health insurance. Mom picked up extra hours at the library and they moved into that apartment complex near the park. Do they like it? They love it, actually. No more worrying about mortgage payments or home repairs. They can walk to the grocery store and the pharmacy. Mom says it's the first time in 20 years she's felt financially secure. Sarah nodded her fingers, drumming against her teacup. "And they're still willing to see me." "Sarah, they never stopped wanting to see you. They were just scared of enabling more destructive behavior. Now that you're getting help and making changes, they're excited to be part of your life again." It had been a long road to this point. After Brad moved out, Sarah had hit what therapists call rock bottom. She'd lost her job after the affair became workplace knowledge, discovered she was facing garnishment for unpaid credit card debt, and found herself alone and pregnant with nowhere to turn. But instead of running back to our parents with more requests for money, she'd done something that shocked everyone she'd asked for help, finding a way to fix her problems instead of escape them. "Dr. Martinez says I'm making good progress with the gambling addiction," Sarah said. "I've been clean for 4 months now, and I'm starting to understand what triggered the compulsive behavior in the first place." "What did trigger it?" "Fear of not having enough," she said with a rueful smile, which is ironic considering that gambling made sure I actually wouldn't have enough. But when you've never had to worry about money the first time you face real financial pressure, it can make you do irrational things. Sarah was living in a studio apartment across town, working 2 part-time jobs and attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings 3 times a week. She'd also started seeing a financial counselor who was helping her create a realistic budget and payment plan for her debts. "What about Brad?" I asked gently. Sarah's expression grew sad but peaceful. "We talk regularly. He's been incredible through all of this, actually. More supportive than I deserved after everything I put him through." "Is he planning to be involved with the baby?" "We're waiting for the paternity test, but he says it doesn't matter to him either way. If the baby is his, he wants to be a father. If it's not, he wants to be an honorary uncle. He's already started reading parenting books and baby-proofing his apartment." I felt a surge of respect for Brad that I hadn't expected. The man had every right to walk away from the chaos Sarah had created, but instead he'd chosen to be part of the solution. "What about the baby's biological father?" "What about him?" Sarah's voice hardened slightly. "He made it clear that he wants nothing to do with this situation when I told him about the pregnancy. His exact words were that he had no interest in dealing with the complications of my personal choices." "I'm sorry, Sarah." "Don't be. It clarified something important for me about the difference between men who talk about commitment and men who actually practice it. Brad has shown more integrity in the past 6 months than my boss showed in 6 months of sneaking around." We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the lunch crowd filter in and out of the diner. Sarah had asked to meet here specifically because it was where she'd had her last gambling session, playing online poker on her phone while eating alone. She said returning to significant places was part of her recovery process. "Jimmy, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest." "Okay. Do you think I'm going to be a good mother?" The question hung between us like a bridge I wasn't sure how to cross. 6 months ago, I would have said no without hesitation. The woman who'd been lying to her husband, stealing from her parents, and gambling away her future had no business raising a child. But the woman sitting across from me now was different. She was facing her problems instead of running from them, taking responsibility for her mistakes instead of blaming others, and building a life based on reality instead of fantasy. "I think you're going to be a different kind of mother than you originally planned," I said carefully. "But I think that might be exactly what your child needs." "What do you mean?" "I think you're going to teach your child things that our parents never taught us. About the value of money and the cost of choices. About the difference between wants and needs. About how to ask for help without manipulation and how to give help without enabling." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "I never thought about it that way. Sarah, you've learned more about financial responsibility in 6 months than some people learn in a lifetime. You've faced addiction and overcome it. You've rebuilt relationships that you damaged through dishonesty. Those aren't easy things to do." "I had good teachers," she said quietly. "And I had a brother who loved me enough to stop enabling my destruction." The compliment caught me off guard. For most of our lives, Sarah had seen me as judgmental and boring. Learning that she now viewed my intervention as an act of love felt like a gift I hadn't expected. "Speaking of which," Sarah continued, "I have something for you." She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope with my name written on it in her careful handwriting. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside was a check for $500 and a letter written on simple notebook paper. "Dear Jimmy," I read aloud, "this is the first payment on the money you unknowingly spent supporting our family while I was taking advantage of Mom and Dad's generosity. I calculate that I owe you approximately $4,000 for the 8 months you covered expenses that should have been my responsibility." I looked up at her in surprise. "Sarah, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do," she interrupted firmly. "I've been paying Mom and Dad $50 a month toward what I owe them, and I'm paying you $50 a month until we're even. It's not much, but it's what I can afford right now, and it's important to me that I follow through." I looked down at the check, understanding that this wasn't really about the money. This was about Sarah proving to herself and to our family that she could keep her word and honor her commitments. "Thank you," I said simply. "Keep reading." I continued with the letter. "I know I can't undo the damage I caused by lying to Brad and manipulating our parents' love for me. But I can commit to being someone different going forward. Someone who contributes to our family's strength instead of undermining it. Someone who teaches her child about responsibility and integrity. Someone who earns love through her actions instead of demanding it through manipulation." I felt my throat tighten with unexpected emotion. The last 6 months have taught me that real security doesn't come from having access to other people's money. It comes from knowing you can take care of yourself and the people you love through honest work and careful planning. I'm not there yet, but I'm learning, and I have you to thank for forcing me to start learning before it was too late. I folded the letter and looked at my sister with new eyes. "I'm proud of you, Sarah." "I'm proud of me too," she said with a laugh, which is something I never thought I'd be able to say. A month later, Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby girl she named Grace. The paternity test revealed that Brad was indeed the father, and he wept with joy when he held his daughter for the first time. They decided not to remarry immediately, but to focus on co-parenting and rebuilding their relationship on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. Mom and Dad were overjoyed to become grandparents, and they threw themselves into the role with enthusiasm tempered by wisdom. Instead of showering Grace with expensive gifts, they offered practical help. Babysitting so Sarah could work, bringing home-cooked meals during those exhausting first weeks, and teaching Sarah about budgeting for a baby's needs. The family dinners resumed 6 months after Grace was born, but they looked different now. We gathered in Mom and Dad's cozy apartment instead of their old house. Sarah brought simple casseroles instead of expecting elaborate meals. Brad joined us regularly, often bringing his guitar to play gentle songs for the baby. The conversations were different too. Instead of avoiding difficult topics, we talked openly about money goals and challenges. Sarah shared updates on her debt reduction progress. Mom and Dad talked about their retirement plans. Brad discussed his growing success with local music venues and his decision to supplement his performance income with guitar lessons. And I found myself talking about things I'd never shared before: my own fears about financial security, my struggles with perfectionism and control, my growing understanding that helping people sometimes means stepping back and letting them face the consequences of their choices. One evening, as we were cleaning up after dinner, Sarah pulled me aside with a serious expression. "Jimmy, I need to tell you something." "What's it about?" "I've been thinking about what you said that day at the restaurant, about me taking advantage of Mom and Dad's sacrifices without ever acknowledging the cost." "Okay. You were right, but you were also incomplete. The truth is, our whole family was trapped in a dysfunctional pattern. Mom and Dad were enabling my irresponsible behavior because they thought that's what love looked like. I was taking advantage of their enabling because I thought that's what family support looked like. And you were standing on the sidelines being critical without actually stepping in to change the dynamic." I felt defensive for a moment, but then realized she was right. "What's your point?" "My point is that all of us had to change for this to work. Mom and Dad had to learn to set boundaries and communicate their limitations. I had to learn to be accountable and self-sufficient. And you had to learn to intervene constructively instead of just judging from a distance." She paused, bouncing Grace gently as the baby fussed. "I guess what I'm saying is thank you for finally caring enough to get involved, even though it was painful for all of us. You saved our family by refusing to let us keep pretending everything was fine." I looked around the apartment at my parents cleaning dishes together, at Brad tuning his guitar, at Sarah holding her daughter with confidence and tenderness. 6 months ago, our family had been held together by lies, manipulation, and financial desperation. Now, we were held together by something much stronger: truth, mutual respect, and genuine love that didn't come with strings attached. "You know what the ironic thing is," I said to Sarah. "What?" "You ended up getting exactly what you always wanted: a family that loves and supports each other. You just had to lose everything else first to realize that love and money aren't the same thing." Sarah smiled as Grace settled into peaceful sleep in her arms. "Best trade I ever made?" As I drove home that night, I reflected on everything our family had been through. The crisis that had started with one cruel comment at a family dinner had ultimately revealed deep-seated problems that had been festering for years. But it had also given us the opportunity to build something healthier and stronger. I'd learned that true family strength doesn't come from avoiding difficult conversations or pretending problems don't exist. It comes from loving people enough to hold them accountable, and from being brave enough to change dysfunctional patterns even when change is uncomfortable. Sarah had learned that security doesn't come from manipulating other people's resources, but from developing your own ability to handle life's challenges with integrity and resilience. Our parents had learned that protecting your children from consequences isn't the same as protecting them from harm, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the reality of their choices. And Brad had learned that commitment isn't about staying with someone through their mistakes, but about staying with them through their genuine efforts to change and grow. The lesson that emerged from our family's crisis was: this real love requires real honesty. Financial boundaries aren't walls that divide families. They're foundations that allow relationships to be built on mutual respect rather than dependency. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is refusing to enable their self-destruction, even when that refusal feels like the cruelest thing you could do. Watching Grace sleep peacefully in her mother's arms, I knew that she would grow up in a family that understood these truths. She would learn that love means supporting someone's growth, not their weaknesses. That security comes from your own capabilities, not from your ability to manipulate others. That honesty might be painful in the moment, but it's the only foundation for lasting happiness. Our family had been broken by lies and greed, but we'd been healed by truth and accountability. And that I realized was a legacy worth passing on to the next generation. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between enabling someone you love and holding them accountable for their actions? Family dynamics around money can be incredibly complex, And sometimes the most loving thing we can do feels like the cruelest. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments about how you've navigated similar challenges in your own relationships. If this story resonated with you, please consider giving it a like and sharing it with others who might benefit from this message about family boundaries and financial responsibility. And if you enjoy stories about real families working through difficult situations with honesty and growth, subscribe for more content that explores the complicated but rewarding journey of building healthier relationships. Thank you for taking this journey with my family and me. I hope our experience offers you both comfort and wisdom as you navigate the complex balance between love and accountability in your own life. Remember that sometimes the most difficult conversations lead to the most meaningful transformations.